So I'm not big on gardening tours, but today I thought it's a beautiful day. So let's just grab the camera and make a completely unscripted tour of my Northern California garden. Hey folks, if we haven't met before, thank you for watching. My name is Tara and I garden in the beautiful Bay Area, and I've been gardening ever since I can remember. Now, a lot of you have found my channel because of my GreenStalk garden, and I've been gardening with GreenStalks for this is my 4th year and loving it. So that's why I've made a lot of content on that, and a lot of you have appreciated that. So I'll keep doing that. But there's more in my garden than my GreenStalks. So let me show you what's going on. So first, let's start with the 2 elevated planters that I have behind me. This one right here is from Costco. It's the Cedarcraft Planter that they sell pretty much every year for roughly $150 or so. And they've maintained the price pretty consistent over the last few years. So I've had this for about 4 years or so. It's done really well for me. I've grown some fabulous things in it, and I've made a lot of videos on it, the good, the bad, the ugly, let's put it that way. And I'll put a link to that video because I know a lot of you do have that planter or do plan on getting the planter because you've seen it so many times at Costco, and a lot of us over here in the United States are members of Costco. So it's a great planter, and there are a few issues that you need to be aware of. Then the other planter over here is very recent. I got this about 3 or 4 months ago from Vego Garden. It is not a self-watering planter, unlike the Cedarcraft, which is self-watering, and this one has done phenomenally well for me. But let me turn the camera around and show you what's going on in these planters. So let's start with the Cedarcraft planter, the self-watering planter. Now I've got a couple of tomato plants growing in here. They're doing quite well. In fact, you can see over there a tomato ripening, and that's not the first one. So doing really well, and they're dwarf tomatoes. Larger tomato plants do struggle a little bit because of the limited soil capacity, as well as the fact that that self-watering container is only 6 gallons and they drink everything very, very quickly. So don't depend on that if you're planting larger tomato plants, but the dwarf tomato plants should do well. I've also got a volunteer bean plant growing here. I've got a bunch of flowers, and these are lasting pretty long. These are violas, and usually they're gone by June, but because we've been having unseasonably cool weather, they're lasting a long time and they look gorgeous. Now let's turn the camera around and I'll show you my pride and joy, my Vego elevated raised bed. Now this has a much larger soil capacity. It's kind of hard to see it because it's so covered in flowers and things, but I literally planted this less than 4 months ago. And it was supposed to be an herb planter. So I planted things like parsley and arugula and green onions and basil and cilantro, which is bolting. But I also made the mistake, the happy mistake of planting marigolds because, you know, marigolds are just the best thing, best companion plants for most vegetables. And they grew and literally took over the planter. So, oh well. And I've got a volunteer tomato plant growing over here. So this is what I mean by not planting very large tomato plants. This thing has grown huge, and it is going to really take a lot of the nutrients from the soil. And guess what? It's a volunteer. And volunteers, why do they always turn out to be cherry tomatoes, you guys? Anyway, I can't kill plants, so I'm letting that be. Another volunteer growing here is a cucumber vine. So I don't know what variety it is, but hey, it looks like it's starting to produce. I can see little cucumbers forming, and since there are both male and female flowers, I'm hoping they'll get pollinated. Now, one thing I did with this plant, which I want to show you, is you see over there, I actually chopped off the growing tip, and that resulted in 2 branches coming out. So that's a little tip for you guys if you want a bushier plant. Yeah, chop it off once in a while and it'll grow new branches. Oh, and I wanted to show you guys these petunias. Now, I grew these petunias from seed. You won't believe how easy it is to grow petunias from seed. So you can see on the little label there, 2/3. So February 3rd is when I planted these from seed. Today is June 20-something, 26th. And yeah, they've been flowering for at least a couple of months now. And I keep chopping them back because they get long and lanky, and they just keep producing more blooms. And right next to it, I've got 4 dwarf tomato plants. Now, I am experimenting a lot with dwarf tomato plants because they grow only 3 to 4 feet tall, maybe even less, and they produce full-size tomatoes. So look at this right here. This one here is a Rosella Crimson. It's got full-size tomatoes, and I've already harvested at least a couple from it, and it's got many more coming. So It's a determinate variety, but it's only about 2 feet tall. The rest of these are about maybe 3 feet tall, and they are indeterminate. This is a Tasmanian chocolate. I haven't got a ripe one from it yet, but you can see that it has got loads of tomatoes forming. So very productive and in small space. You can grow them in containers and they don't take a lot of room. You don't have to do much trellising. I've got just one bamboo stake here that's holding this thing up. And yeah, this is another one right here. This is called Blazing Beauty. It's an orange tomato. I've got another decently large tomato coming on this thing called Boronia. So yeah, grow dwarf tomatoes if you can get a hold of them, because they are fantastic producers and they don't take up much space. And this one here is my latest acquisition. This is an Easy Cube from Vego Garden. This is a self-watering planter. You can see the dark gray portion of it, or the dark green portion of it. It contains 20 gallons of water, so 10 gallons per reservoir. And that actually is a lot of water. So it can let me go on vacation for a few days without having to worry about the plants drying out. And again, I've got dwarf tomatoes, I've got a pepper plant, I've got a bunch of bean plants. I planted some cucumber and some cantaloupe, baby cantaloupe. It's called tiger melon in the back. And then I've got marigolds and I've got a lot of little bean plants. These are cluster beans. So I'll put a video if you want to learn more about this planter. I set it up literally about a week ago and it's growing really, really well. It's getting really warm. I'm really sweaty. It was about, I think, 85 degrees today, so it got pretty warm, and it's going to get even warmer. Summer is finally kicking in here in Northern California. And yeah, let's talk about my GreenStalks, my summer GreenStalks, and what's going on there. But I'll also leave affiliate links in the description. I am a Vego Garden as well as a GreenStalk affiliate. And for Vego Garden products, if you use my link, that would support my channel, and you can use the code GREENLOVE to get $10 off your purchase. And with GreenStalks, you can use the code GREENLOVE10 and get $10 off your purchase. So let's turn around and see what's going on in the GreenStalks. So I do live streams on GreenStalk content on the first Saturday of every month. And at the last one, I told the people on the live stream that next month you won't be able to see my GreenStalks. And that prediction is starting to come true. The tomato plants, the bean plants, the egg plants, everything's growing just really, really huge and covering up the GreenStalk. So this one has mostly beans in it, and I've got some squash at the bottom. I just noticed today that something has been nibbling on one of my squash plants. Look at that. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to protect them. They're on the bottom row, and I do believe they're squirrels. That's my biggest problem, is squirrels. So this is growing really well, all direct seeded. And one little tip I wanted to offer you is if you're having trouble getting your seeds, your bean seeds to sprout in the GreenStalk, don't soak them. And also make sure that you don't water too terribly much, because the seeds do tend to rot. The GreenStalks do retain water. You've got good soil, peat-based, and we do tend to overlove our GreenStalks. So keep the watering to a little bit of a minimum when you are planting bean seeds directly. And then after they start growing, you can revert to normal. So moving on to this GreenStalk, this has got some interesting plants growing in it. This one here is tiger melon. It is a nice compact cantaloupe type melon. First time I'm growing it. And of course, it's going to need the plant support to vine. And I'll probably give it some bamboo stakes as well. This one here is called clove bean. Again, the first time I'm growing this one as well. And obviously it's wanting to climb somewhere. So I'm going to have to, I guess, let it share the plant support with the tiger melon. We'll see how it does. Now, this here is a Cajun jewel okra, and it is a bush type okra, so it won't grow very tall. Supposed to be decently productive. Again, first time I'm growing it. So lots of first timers in this particular GreenStalk. And then I've got this one. I love this particular tomato plant. It's a dwarf tomato called Rosella Purple, and I'll show you its parent in another part of my garden. It's something else. And this GreenStalk has a lot of celery and parsley and strawberries. So it's got a lot of my spring plants still sort of hanging in there, but it does have some eggplants. It does have a cute little dainty Isabel tomato plant, which has a ripe tomato on it. And it's got arugula. Have you guys ever grown wild arugula? It's much more heat tolerant than your annual arugula, and it's a perennial. So it tastes just like arugula, and I guess that's because it is arugula. And meandering over to the back here, these are all my terracotta GreenStalks. when I first started buying green stalks, I wanted them all to be terracotta. And then terracotta became a limited color and went away. So I had to graduate, and now I've got evergreen, and now I've got raspberry, and now I've got lemon. So I've got lots of colors. I've got 11 green stalks in total and counting. So you can see a large clump of tomatoes growing on this. I don't even know what variety of dwarf tomato this is. I think it's an Adelaide Festival. Kind of looks like it, but we'll see. This is what happens when you don't label on time. Calendula is one of those things that grows actually really well in the green stalk. And if you're looking for flowers to grow in the green stalk, which I highly advise, calendulas, marigolds, petunias, nasturtiums, sweet alyssum. This year I'm growing vinca as well. Just a lot of flowers that do really well in the green stalk. And they add so much to the green stalk from a beauty perspective. So I highly recommend throwing in a few flowers and coleus too. Let me show you my coleus. I had to go hunting for it. It is really being overshadowed by these tomato plants and eggplants. I'm going to have to do something about it. I might just have to pull out the coleus and give it another home. It may not grow successfully with all of these large summer plants around it. I do have peppers growing as well. These are Jimmy Nardellos, and if you haven't had Jimmy Nardellos, I just highly recommend it. Very productive. It's a sweet pepper. It gets to a beautiful lipstick red color, and they're just so yummy. You just sort of lightly fry them with some oil and salt, and oh gosh, they're delicious. And I've got my very first banana pepper. The leaves in the way. Here we go. Yep. So yeah, peppers grow really well in the green stalk, especially the more compact varieties. More tomatoes in this green stalk. This one I am trying to get strawberries to grow, but so many other things coming in the way of that. So yeah, just a little piece of advice, you guys, be a little bit conservative about how many plants you plant in the green stalk. Things grow really well because the soil is awesome. And if you've got a primary, like for me, these strawberries, they just don't do very well when you've got something like sweet alyssum growing right next to them. So yeah. Less is more. So my green stalks are sitting around my Costco Cedarcraft greenhouse. So it's about 3 years old now. I absolutely love it. It is holding up really well. And I'm in California, so greenhouses technically are not as essential because our winters are so short. And I actually have been using it though, even now, right now, we could take a look. But I've got a lot of seedlings that I'm starting, which are going to succession a lot of my spring vegetables as they go away in my green stalks and other parts of my garden. I'm succession planting things like tomatoes and cucumbers and squash. So let's go take a look and see what's going on in the greenhouse. So you guys are going to have to pardon the mess. Yep, so lots of seedlings and things going on here. I grow a lot of stuff from cuttings, you guys. If that's an option, do that. It's just so much faster than growing from seed. And here's a little experiment with cilantro growing in terracotta pots. So a little backstory, when I was growing up in India, we did not have a refrigerator at home. And so it's so hot during the summer days and we used to crave iced water. And instead of that, my mother used to get these clay pots and fill them up with water. And the clay pots actually cooled the water down. It was almost like iced water. So the reason for the story is that terracotta clay pots do tend to keep things cooler, including soil. And so technically, cilantro, which is a cool weather crop, should grow much better in terracotta. But follow along and I'll show you how they do. Okay, so this tray here that is full of cantaloupe seedlings is another little quirk of my personality. I can't throw seeds away anymore, you guys. So eating cantaloupe the other day, I just grabbed all the seeds and threw it in some soil in this tray. And guess what? They all sprouted. Anyone want cantaloupe seedlings? Anyone have the problem that I have where you can't throw seeds away anymore? Yep, lots of other plants. These are all lavender and rosemary plants that I started from cuttings. Yes, you can. And yes, I do have a video on that. And I've got other little seedlings. These are petunia seedlings. Like I said, they grow so easily. So I got some really neat varieties that I'm growing from seed. And more cantaloupe. And I've got other perennial flowers. I've got snapdragons. I've got painted daisies. Here's some bush watermelon. I'm growing these for my green stalk. So never grown that variety before. I don't know how big it's going to get or how many melons it'll produce, but we'll see. And over here, I've got snapdragons. Snapdragons are also perennial flowers. They prefer the cooler weather. So this is an experiment of sorts to see whether I can grow snapdragons in my greenhouse and then eventually plant them out in my garden, maybe in fall or winter. So outside my greenhouse, I just wanted to pan around my backyard here. Now, this was all completely lawn just a couple of years ago. And then we brought in wood chips and smothered all of the grass. And we planted, basically put some structure in it, put some little planters. These are all temporary. And I'm just filling it up with random plants for now. Nothing is permanent. And eventually we will sort out what we want to do with this backyard. But in the meanwhile, I want to get my soil going. I want to bring that life back into soil that was completely devoid of nutrients and so dead because of all of the grass that we kept mowing and throwing away. And I love this little statue. This is something that I actually picked up at a garage sale for free. Now, that's another little quirk of my personality. I do not like spending too much money on stuff. I'm always looking for good deals. And this is one of them. All right, let's just go around a little bit over here. These are purple tails. Bees love them and they are very, very drought tolerant. That's another thing I'm trying to do is reduce my water consumption. We do have a well and it's still California, very dry climate, and as much as we can preserve water, it's a good thing. Feverfew is a fun plant to grow. Now, I hear that the bees don't like them very much. In fact, it repels the bees, so I have hesitated to grow it for a long time. But eventually someone gave me a plant and I'm glad I planted it because it brings me a lot of joy. Some more interesting plants that I'm growing. This one over here is a tamarillo plant, also called a tree tomato. And it grows fruit that are kind of like, they look like tomatoes and they are kind of like fruity tomatoes is what I hear. A lot of people don't like the taste, but hey, it's growing really, really fast and the leaves are just huge. They kind of smell a little bit weird. I don't like that about them. But yeah, it's growing well and I hope it'll produce something for me this year. This is another interesting plant. This is a banana plant and it's a tropical plant and I don't think it's going to thrive here, but it's growing in a container and so far, so good. Let's take you under the grapevine to the other side, and I want to show you my north garden. But yeah, this grapevine produces lots of grapes. It's been here for more than 20 years, and the grapes are unfortunately seeded, very sweet purple grapes, and the squirrels eat more of it than we do. And this garden here in front of us is the very first set of raised beds I put in, but I haven't been using it that much lately. You can see this weird trellis that I put up. Yeah, poor substitute for a cattle panel. But I get a lot of mouse and rat and vole activity here. So you can see all these baskets that I'm trying to protect. Some cucumber plants that I'm growing. I don't have much hope for them. I've got some bean plants over here. Not much hope for them either. So I eventually ended up planting a lot of stuff that these creatures don't like sage and mint, and then a lot of onions. So maybe they'll do okay, but I did want to show you one patch here. These dried out things with the Egyptian walking onions standing among them are actually saffron. So this entire bed has saffron in it, and round about the September timeframe, I'll start watering it, and I will hopefully get a lot more saffron than I did last year. This is growing in ground. Most of the time I've grown saffron, it's always been in containers. So this is an interesting experiment. Follow along. I've got lots of videos on my 4-year, now 5-year journey growing saffron in my backyard. Yeah, so last year I grew something like 120 blooms or something of saffron. It was just crazy. You'd think, hey, if it's that easy to grow saffron, why is it so expensive? That's because it is so painstaking to harvest those stigma, dry them out. It's a very delicate operation and it takes a lot of those little stigma to make a sufficient amount of saffron even for one paella. So yeah, grow saffron. If you're in zones 4 through I think 11, you can grow saffron. And if you're in one of those really cold zones where it freezes really, really hard during winter, you may have to dig it up and put it away and then replant it in September. But yeah, it's very, very easy and very, very rewarding to grow saffron. And it's just a gorgeous purple crocus flower. Speaking of purple flowers, look behind me, you guys. Let me spin the camera around. Yep, these are artichoke blooms. Look how pretty they are. The bees absolutely go nuts for them. I don't even like artichoke. I grow them just for the bees. And this year, I'm actually getting quite a few artichokes. So these plants are probably, this is year 3 for them. And yeah, they're growing really well. Again, a hot, dry Mediterranean climate is great for artichokes. Walking over here to my Razzleberry Flower GreenStalks, which are completely overgrown, but still beautiful. Now, I can't do anything about them because a little birdie has made its nest in one of these pockets. And every time I go close to it, they start to cheep and chirp, and then sometimes they fly out from it and startle me. So I've decided to let them have the GreenStalk. And when they're done with it, I'll come and prune it back and do something with it. Okay, let's walk over to the other side. Yeah, there's more in my garden. I want to show you all my tomato plants and other things. Yeah, so I also wanted to show you on the way there my fruit orchard. Now, all of these plants are roughly a couple of years old at the most. And I actually got several donut peaches from that tiny little plant. Of course, the squirrels decided to eat most of them. It was so frustrating. I got only one. And then I've got a lot of citrus trees growing, plenty of mint, and this is what I call my fruit tree nursery. It's basically for plants that I do not have a spot for in mind yet. A lot of them are fig trees. I've got some curry leaf trees. I've got some pomegranates, and I'm so proud of the one on the right. I actually grew that from seed, you guys. Those huge ones that you get in Costco. I saved seeds and I was able to grow one to a decent size. So I planted in the ground. The one on the left is from a cutting. I think it is Eversweet pomegranate. I've got a loquat tree growing there, another little curry leaf plant, and there's a lot of grapevines as well that I've got in between there. So, yep, lots in the works. And then to my right here, I've got what I call my flower corridor. Now, the original intent of this was to plant a ton of annual flowers, particularly zinnias, but everything that I plant here by seed directly gets eaten by roly-polies. I think it's part of nature trying to balance things out. This used to be like dirt, construction dirt, and I'm trying to build soil, but until this place stabilizes and good bugs and bad bugs balance things out, it's going to be a struggle to grow anything here. So I'm just planting whatever, and whatever grows, grows. So eventually, hopefully, the soil will get to a point where I can actually grow zinnias successfully. But in the meanwhile, check out that coreopsis, you guys. A perennial flower that grows very well in hot, dry climates. And another one is echinacea. I'm going to get more echinacea. I just love that flower. Hamper, which we never take out anymore. We got it during COVID, but no one's interested in it anymore. By the way, guys, this is another Vego garden product which I really love. It's been a game changer in my garden. It's a retractable hose, and oh my gosh, it has made my life so much more pleasant after I got it. These beds I've kind of neglected this year. I like to give my garden beds a rest once in a while, and this is the year for these beds. I do have asparagus growing in this bed, and it's obviously a perennial, so it will continue to grow. I've got a few things that I've thrown in here, some gourds and Armenian cucumbers, a random tomato plant, but nothing that I'm paying close attention to. But right here is where all of my tomato plants are. Now, this year I decided to go the planter route for all my tomato plants. Let me go on this side. Because squirrels were getting everything that was in ground in my raised beds. So I've got these kind of makeshift cages that I've put up, and hopefully they'll serve as a deterrent for the squirrels. But so far so good. Nothing has gotten to my tomatoes, and I don't want to jinx it. There are rats too around here. Plants are looking a little droopy. I've let them go crazy this year. This is an experiment that I'm doing. No pruning, nothing. Let them just do their thing. But one of the negatives of that is they do tend to dry out a lot faster, and I do need to water more. So yeah, and then another interesting plant that I'm growing here is a new kind of tomatillo. It's called, what is the name? Chupo de Malinalco. And again, looking a little dried out, but yeah, they are elongated tomatillo-like fruit, and they do have a fruity flavor. So very keen to grow this for the first time as well. Just a quick spin around. These are my lemon GreenStalks. Slow but steady. All the plants seem to be taking. They've been in here for a couple of weeks now and they're stabilizing. I've got zinnias. They're all flowers. Zinnias, calendulas, coleus, society garlic, all kinds of good stuff, which I'm hoping will look beautiful in maybe a month or two. And then spinning around this way, this is kind of a neglected part of my garden, but I do like this portion right here. This is actually a concrete fountain that I decided I didn't want to have be a fountain anymore, so I put all of my succulents in it. And they are actually looking pretty nice and they seem to be very happy. So unlike what people tell you, don't water succulents, they actually like water. Not too much, but they like regular water and they do well in places where there's not too terribly much sun, at least in my garden. This is a shady part of my garden and the succulents are looking absolutely phenomenal. And then the last portion of my garden here, this is my pink lemonade blueberry plant. You guys, they are beautiful and they taste like lemonade. Can you believe that? They actually taste like lemonade. This is year 3 for them. I'm so thrilled with these. I grew them from like 6-inch size saplings that I got from Baker Creek, and they are actually producing. Now, the first couple of years, I actually removed all the berries. I didn't allow them to fruit. And this year, they are starting to reward me. Next year is going to be even better, I hope. Yeah, so check the video that I made on growing blueberries. I've been growing them for 3 years and I've learned a lot along the way, and I've made some pretty popular videos on growing blueberries and some important things that you need to know. Oh well, it's end of blueberry season, but you know what's looking gorgeous here? These are, guess what these are, you guys? Carrot blossoms. Yeah, I allowed my carrots to go to seed because I want to save seeds. Plus, I also love these blossoms. Look how pretty they look. And the pollinators love them too. So this planter that I'm showing you right now is probably the most fertile and productive planter in my entire garden. And it's only about 2 years old. Guess what I filled it with? Oak leaves, you guys. I've got oak trees all around my backyard. That's where the squirrels come from. That's their home. And I just stuffed tons and tons of oak leaves in here. And then I put a layer of soil on the top and everything over here grows magnificently. Don't ask me why, it just does. And I wanted you to see this Rosella purple tomato plant. Remember I showed you the little cutting that I had rooted and put in the GreenStalk, but this is the parent plant. It's a dwarf tomato plant, but it is huge. It's about more than 3 feet tall and more than 3 feet wide, and it is simply loaded with tomatoes. So very excited about this variety. I'm hoping it will actually live long enough to let the tomatoes ripen, because I was seeing what I think is a little bit of disease right there. So anyway, fingers crossed that it's very localized. I'm spraying with 3% hydrogen peroxide solution to keep disease away. And that's one tip for you guys. Spray every couple of weeks. It really helps with fungal disease. And my peppers are coming, you guys. Peppers and then more coreopsis flowers. Volunteers. And this here is my dragon fruit plant. Now, lots of videos on this as well. And this is a bloom. So I'm actually getting blooms already. And I've got 2 other dragon fruit plants because the one that I just showed you is a self-sterile variety. So it needs a partner to fertilize it. Now, these are much younger dragon fruit plants, so they probably won't produce those blooms on time, but maybe next year. Until then, I'll just enjoy the blooms. They're absolutely stunning. And this here is a fig tree. Now, this fig tree is pretty loaded with figs. I do not know what the variety is, but they are delicious. And it's my oldest fig tree, but it's staying very small because it's growing in that whiskey barrel. More tomato plants gone wild. My husband's like, your tomato plants are growing too big. I'm like, yeah, but that's what the experiment is all about. And they're fruiting. That's one advantage, is the more branches they have, the more fruit they'll produce. And then over here, I've got a bunch of fruit trees. This is a pomegranate tree that I have been nursing for the past 4 years or so. And this year is its ultimatum. The ultimatum being, if it doesn't produce at least 6 full pomegranates for me, it's going. I can't take care of it anymore. So bar is very low. So do your thing, produce at least 6, and you got a home for another year. I've got some citrus that is growing in containers, just like I've got them in ground. And I found that the ones in ground do actually much better. But this one is pretty loaded. This is a Satsuma orange, and it is quite loaded with fruit. I hope they make it to full size. And then more fig trees here. This is an Italian honey fig, super delicious green fig. This is a Maya lemon tree that turned all yellow during winter, and now it's flushing out in beautiful green. I'm so happy. It looks like we saved it. And that's going to go in the ground as well because I think it has outgrown this pot. It's about 4 years old. This fig tree is a brown turkey. Texas everbearing, I think, is another name for it. And it dried out at one point because we forgot to water it. But it looks like it's producing some leaves and it might make it. And then I've got a lime tree over here, which didn't do well either. But now it seems to be putting out some nice green growth. So that's the whirlwind tour of my garden, you guys. People ask me how I do it, how I manage to maintain a pretty large-sized garden all by myself without any help. I don't have a gardener. And I do it because I love it. I get joy out of it. And when you're doing something that you love so much, I spend a lot of hours in my garden, it doesn't feel like work. So I hope you find your passion. And I hope gardening is one of the things that you love to do. And if you do, happy gardening and have a wonderful gardening season. Until next time, folks, live green and love your greens.